and to give his life a ransom for many.
Hear these words from the 104th Psalm. Listen for the word of the Lord. Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, you are very great. You are clothed with honor and majesty, wrapped in light as with a garment. You stretch out the heavens like a tent. You set the beams of your chambers on the waters. You make the clouds your chariot. You ride on the wings of the wind. You make the winds your messengers, fire and flame your ministers. You set the earth on its foundations so that it shall never be shaken. You cover it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they flee. At the sound of your thunder they take to flight. They rose up to the mountains, ran down to the valleys, to the place that you appointed for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass, so that they might not again cover the earth. O Lord, how manifold are your works! In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Praise the Lord. Let us pray. Faithful God, may my words be your words, and may the meditations of all our hearts be guided by you. O God, our help in ages past, present, and future. Amen. Back when we were married, we of course had a registry. I think it was at Target. I don't remember. It's been a while now. Anyway, wherever it was, we of course had our little scanning guns, and we went through and we scanned a bunch of stuff that we thought we would need. And after the fact, we sat down to open our many gifts. And it is my experience that when you sign up for one of these registries, whether it's for a wedding, whether it's in anticipation of a new baby, whatever the specifics, these gifts fall into three categories. The first is, why did we ask for that? You use it maybe once, or it sits in the package forever. You never get around to opening it. So there's that stuff. And then there's the stuff that, oh, this is nice. We can use this. We're using it regularly, and this is helpful, and that's wonderful. And then there are those gifts that you are so thankful that you have received. There are those gifts that you use way more often than any of the others. And you think to yourself, how did I get along before I had this wonderful thing? One of those things for us was a Pampered Chef baking stone. Some of you already know where this is going. So we had this Pampered Chef baking stone, and at first you get it, and it is kind of this light tan color. And as you use it, more and more that you use it, it is blackened by the things that you make or cook on it. It is enriched by the things that you use it for. And so, for over 13 years, this baking stone was made rich and blackened through use after use after use after use. It blessed so many meals. It blessed so many get-togethers, large and small. We used it all the time. So this past week, I went home for lunch. And I set some food on this baking stone. I waited for the oven to warm up, and the light went off. I put the stone in, I kind of milled around the kitchen waiting, and I just hear this bang! And it came from the oven, and I was worried that the oven itself, something was wrong with the oven itself. But it sounded like it came from inside the oven. One of the metal racks had done something. So I flipped on the light and I peeked in, and this stone had split almost right down the middle. Our stone blew up. Apparently that happens. And so one of these most wonderful gifts that we had been given so many years ago, that we had come to treasure, now we're in mourning. It may be that each of us can name gifts like this. Gifts like this that we have been given, whether for a wedding or a shower of some kind, whether for a birthday or for certain holidays, whether just out of the blue, out of the kindness of someone's heart. Whatever the specifics, maybe we have these gifts that we can point to, and we can remember the specifics of how and why we acquired them, who gave them to us, and why they are special. Why they are beloved. Why they are appreciated. Why they are useful to us. The psalmist, part of the psalm that we've heard this morning, is doing just that. The psalmist is celebrating certain gifts. There are certain psalms that we have where it seems like the inspiration for writing them was that the psalmist just walked outside, basically. The psalmist just walks outside and he looks around and he is just amazed by what he sees. And so we have these psalms that celebrate the grandeur of the mountains and the vastness of the oceans or the fields. All of the animals of the air or the sea or the land. The psalmist just looks at it all and marvels that they all exist, that God created all of it. And that is what this psalm is one of those that celebrates God's creation. But not only that, but you get into the specifics of this psalm, and what he is also celebrating is how close God is to it. And how God is still working through it and in it. He says things like, "You are clothed in light as with a garment. Wind and fire are your servants. You ride on the clouds like a chariot. You set the beams of all creation in the oceans." That is how close God is to what God has created. God did not just set the timer and then wandered off to do something else. Instead, God is intimately involved with what God has done and is doing in the world. And then, because the lectionary does this, the lectionary being that suggested set of Bible texts from one Sunday to the next, we skip some verses, and we get to verse 24, where still the psalmist is celebrating. "In wisdom you have created all of this. The earth is full of your creatures, full of everything that you have created." He is still celebrating. But then, it's worth noting what we skipped over. It's worth noting what happens in between verses 9 and 24, because in those verses, if you read through those, the writer of this psalm is celebrating how creation is a gift. How God gives things like grass to cattle. God gives mountains to goats to stand on. That was very generous. God gives us all manner of food from the earth. God gives us wine to gladden the human heart. He goes on and on about how all that God has created is a gift. That so many other parts of God's creation, all of God's creatures, can enjoy all of these gifts that have been given to us. We can treasure them and use them well. The author and speaker Rob Bell, in one of his books, reflects on the meaning of the word Eucharist. We commonly think Eucharist being one of several terms that we may hear to refer to the sacrament of communion. We may be more used to calling it communion or the Lord's Supper. But nevertheless, Eucharist, one of the available terms to us for this special moment that is celebrated with bread and with cup. And he breaks down the meaning or the origin of this word, Eucharist. And he reflects on how it actually comes from two Greek words, one meaning good and one meaning to give. And his conclusion is that one of the ways we may think about this special moment that we occasionally celebrate is God's good gift to us. That through that special sacrament, we experience, we remember God's good gifts of grace, God's good gifts of love and presence and forgiveness with us. And then he goes a step further. He reflects on how the church is meant to embody and to always celebrate God's good gifts. And not only that, but the church itself is meant to be one of God's good gifts. And to help drive the point home, he asks a question. He asks, if your church disappeared tomorrow, who would protest? If your church disappeared tomorrow, who would grieve? Would it just be the worshiping community, the worshiping membership? Or would that group of people feeling grief and protest over that loss also include others? Would it also include the neighborhood or the community or the region in which it sits? Who would grieve? And so we might ask that question of ourselves. What if tomorrow morning we all woke up and Grace United Church of Christ on Cleveland Avenue in Uniontown, Ohio suddenly wasn't there anymore? Who would grieve? Who would protest? Would it just be the worshiping community that gathers every Sunday morning? Or might it include others? Might it also include the many sports teams that enjoy practice space here? Might it also include the Red Cross that administers blood drives here? Might it also include the Scouts that have their charter here? Might it also include the other community groups that are able to enjoy this facility on a daily or weekly or monthly basis? Might it also include the heartbroken, the downtrodden, the wandering, the lost, the wayward? Might it also include those harboring doubts and a place to ask their questions safely? Might it also include those who have been excluded from other faith communities seeking a spiritual home? Who would grieve? This church can be, and already is, a good gift. Can be and is one of God's good gifts, not just to us, but to others. So, here we are, again, on Stewardship Sunday. And as has already been mentioned, there is this temptation or this tendency to hear stewardship a certain way. There is this temptation or tendency to hear stewardship only in terms of, help us pay our bills. Please. Lights, boiler, electricity. We need help with this stuff. Please fill out your card. There is a tendency or temptation to only think of stewardship in those terms. But I submit to you that primarily stewardship is about ministry. Stewardship is about ministry. It is about giving in order for this church's ministry to one another and to the community in which we reside. Stewardship is about giving in many ways. Giving of our time so that a youth may feel less isolated or a shut-in might feel less alone. Stewardship is about giving of our resources, whatever they may be, so that we have curricula for faith formation, so that we might have resources to feed the hungry and to engage in mission. So we have music resources to enjoy during worship. Stewardship is about giving of our building. Again, not just for the groups that we make up, but also for the community groups that are able to use what we have. And let me tell you something about scuff marks on walls and bathrooms that need to be cleaned. You know what that means? It means we're getting used. It means this building is getting used. It is like a pizza stone that is becoming blackened and enriched by those who use it. Stewardship also means giving of our talents. It means giving in so many ways so that we may be blessed by one another in terms of food or art or craftsmanship or expertise or a million other abilities that each of us have, that we may contribute to our life together. And ultimately, it is about celebrating and participating in God's good gifts of creation and God's good gifts of grace that we realize and that we experienced through Christ. Stewardship is about ministry. So let us give. Let us give in order to engage in that ministry as we are called here in this place. Amen.